In 1845, Mary Allure was sentenced at a tree after being accused of witchcraft. The townspeople nailed a mask to her face before setting her body on fire. Then, a priest recited an incantation while holding a doll. Hours later, her charred body was still hanging from the tree. In the present day, in Massachusetts, disgraced journalist Jerry visits a farmer who claims his cow was marked by a cult, but upon closer inspection, Jerry discovers the symbol of metallic and suspects it was actually the farmer's son. Suddenly, Jerry hears a strange whisper that leads him to a nearby tree, where he sees something glinting in the sunlight. He reaches into the tree and finds a burned doll with a tag that reads, February 1st, 1845. The farmer comments that it's common for workers to leave dolls in the ground for good luck, but none look like this one. Seeing a chance for a spooky story, Jerry stomps on the doll's head to break it and takes photos of the farmer pretending to find it. Later that night, Jerry is driving out of town while drinking. As he turns to grab the bottle, he nearly runs over a girl list, but swerves just in time. His car crashes, but he comes out unharmed. As he steps out of the vehicle, he notices something moving in the shadows. It's Alice. Jerry follows her into the forest, and they return to the same tree from earlier. On her knees before the trees, Alice repeatedly says that she gives her soul. When Jerry touches her shoulder, she faints. He then takes her back to town and finds out she lives with Father Huygen, her uncle, and only living relative. Huygen calls Dr. Natsley, who examines Alice and confirms she's unharmed, then reveals the girl is deaf and mute. Jerry is puzzled, as he clearly heard the girl speak, but Natsley blames it on the alcohol. With his car in the shop, Jerry has to stay at a local motel. He goes to the church, listens to Huygen preach, and notices Alice staring intently at a statue of Mary. She keeps hearing a female voice calling her name. Then, as if in a trance, she stands up and walks out of the church. Other girls follow her in a perfect line. Everyone else exits as well, and Jerry readies his camera to film as Alice faces the tree and sees an apparition of Mary. After standing silently for a few seconds, she shocks everyone by saying she heard the voice of the Virgin Mary herself, who is asking everyone to return to the tree. The next day, Natalie runs some tests, and Alice becomes excited to learn that she can now hear Id attenti. Jerry has a nightmare. The sky turns red over the town. The doll shatters, and a ghostly woman crawls out of a blood-stained stream. He wakes up with a drop of water falling on his face and sees that the ceiling is covered in mold. The next day, all the townspeople return to the tree, and Jerry films everything again. He tries to stop Alice, but she goes anyway, touches the tree, and sees Mary once more. Then she approaches a paralyzed boy and tells him to have faith in Mary because she is commanding him to walk. To everyone's astonishment, the boy stands up and is able to walk. Jerry records this too, as everyone kneels down to pray. Inside the church, the statue of the Virgin Mary begins to cry tears of blood. The miracle is quickly reported and goes viral. Bishop Giles and Monsignor Delgard are sent by the Vatican to investigate whether the miracle is real or a hoax. At a press conference, they mention the 3 only officially recognized modern miracles attributed to Mary, which inspired 3 sanctuaries visited by millions of people every year. To confirm a miracle, 3 criteria must be met. The illness must be incurable. The healing must be instantaneous. The cure must be complete. Alice arrives at the press conference and is frightened by the overwhelming number of reporters asking rude and foolish questions. Jerry steps in with a more gentle approach, allowing her to express her faith, and because of this, she chooses to respond only to him. While the priests investigate the conditions surrounding the miracle, a protective covering is installed over the tree in case it needs to be converted into a sanctuary. When Huygen approaches the tree, he discovers the doll buried in the ground, and a terrifying apparition appears near him. The creature is about to attack, but vanishes as soon as others arrive. Huygen returns inside and interrupts Jerry's interview with Alice. He begins coughing heavily due to his lung disease, but brushes off the symptoms and lights a cigarette. Huygen scolds Jerry for using Alice to gain fame, fearing the negative attention could harm his niece. He warns Jerry. Next to every sanctuary, the devil builds a chapel. He reminds him that people who VE claimed to see Mary in the past were often treated like freaks, sent to convents, or died months later. He He refuses to let that happen to Alice. That night, back at the motel, Jerry keeps hearing unsettling whispers behind him. He sees nothing in the hallway, but when he turns around, a hooded figure is standing right behind him. The next day, Alice rehearses a hymn with Huygen, while Jerry and Delgard watch. Suddenly, Huygen starts coughing violently and collapses. As Jerry calls for an ambulance, Alice tells Huygen to give his soul to Mary. She places her hand on his chest, and his coughing stops. Huygen is overjoyed to realize he can breathe normally again, but he's shaken when he sees a dark presence behind Alice reaching toward her. Later at the hospital, Natalie shows 2 medical scans, one taken a few days ago, and one from that very moment. It's clear Huygen's disease has disappeared without explanation. She also confirms that they examined the formerly paraplegic boy, and all his medical issues had vanished, as if by magic. Delgard and Giles have no choice but to officially declare it a true miracle. Soon, the tree is transformed into a sanctuary, the story goes viral again, and the town begins receiving tourists from all over the country. People start calling Alice a heroine and become her fans. She even gets her own Wikipedia page, and someone goes as far as saying she'll be bigger than Taylor Swift. Still, some remain skeptical and claim it's all a hoax. One man decides to leave town with his family, convinced that when God appears on Earth, it's a sign of tragedy. As reporters swarm Alice's home and disrupt their lives, Huygen decides to send her to a diocese in Boston for her safety. Sometime later, Huygen is smoking a cigarette inside the church when he notices the smoke drifting in a strange direction. He follows it and finds a hole in the wall, inside of which is a notebook. The book details the steps of a ritual to seal the devil using a mask and a doll. In the shadows, something watches him. Meanwhile, Jerry is having dinner with Natalie and tells her about the doll he found. She explains that these dolls are used to contain evil, and people seal them with an impossible date like February 31st to keep them locked away. After dinner, they go for a walk, and Jerry is stunned to see the very stream from his dream. Natalie remarks that the church used to own most of the town. Jerry surprises her by guessing it happened in 1845. Then, Jerry examines the water and suddenly sees the ghostly woman from his dream leaping toward him. As he turns around, for a brief moment, he almost sees Natalie as the ghost. Growing suspicious, he says they need to talk to Huygen. At the same time, Huygen hears the sound of chains inside the church and realizes someone has entered the confessional booth. He steps inside and begins the confession, hearing a woman's voice saying ordinary things until she begins speaking of how she destroyed many lives. Her voice grows dark and terrifying as she announces she's come to take him. A hand slams against the confessional divider as the woman says Satan gave her power, and that she is the one who healed Huygen, but was offended by his doubts. The lights begin to flicker as she continues, detailing how she killed everyone who tried to stop her. Terrified Huygen rushes out of the confessional and hears the church organ playing by itself. He sees a hooded ghost standing in the middle of the church with a rope draped over its shoulders. He tries to escape, but the spirit blocks his path and lunges at him. When Jerry arrives, he hears a noise coming from the confessional and opens it tonally to find nothing inside. At that moment, a body appears hanging behind him, and Jerry is horrified to see that Huygen is dead. After the paramedics take Huygen away, Giles asks Jerry to keep the circumstances of Huygen's death secret, as it would damage the public's faith in the local church. However, Jerry doesn't believe Huygen would have done this to himself. The next day, he visits Alice and mentions that Huygen believed evil always follows miracles. Alice, on the other hand, insists that Mary would never allow something like that to happen. That night, back at the motel, Jerry notices all the lights flickering again as the whispers return. This time, he sees the ghost at the end of the hallway, but it vanishes within seconds. Later, as he reviews the interview footage, he notices a blur next to Alice in several recordings. He slows down the video and is shocked to see the ghost moving within the paused frame before disappearing. As Jerry leans in toward the screen, the ghost suddenly leaps at him, then vanishes again. The next day, during Huygen's funeral, Jerry speaks with Natalie, who also doesn't believe Huygen gave up on life. Together, they go into the church basement and find the notebook Huygen had hidden. Inside, they uncover the story of Mary Elnor. She was able to heal the sick and claimed that the Virgin Mary spoke through anyone who doubted her ended up dead. In 1845, the town turned against Mary and drowned her in the creek until she confessed to serving Satan. They then nailed a mask of the Virgin Mary to her face and burned her alive, sealing her ashes and soul into the doll that Jerry had broken. After Mary's death, all the people she had healed became sick again. Jerry concludes that it is Mary Eleanor, not the Virgin Mary, who has been speaking to Alice. He realizes the ghost killed Hagen because he had discovered the truth in the notebook. At the same time, Alice interrupts her uncle's mass, claiming that Mary wants everyone to gather at the sanctuary that night. Meanwhile, Jerry sees a sheet moving on its own, but when he lifts it, he finds only an old statue of Jesus. Suddenly, another cloth falls, and the ghost appears, lunging to attack them. The lamp shatters during the struggle, and Jerry and Natalie flee just in time. They want to warn Alice, but Delgard is already taking her away to avoid the growing crowds. Jerry and Natalie head to Boston, where Natalie searches for Alice at the convent, while Jerry confronts Giles and Delgard with the contents of the notebook. Giles already knew everything, but Delgard had never been informed. Even so, Giles dismisses Jerry's concerns and insists the ceremony will proceed, claiming an old diary isn't valid evidence. At the convent, the nuns refuse to let Natalie see Alice. Meanwhile, Jerry takes the opportunity to search the diocesan archives, where he discovers that before Mary died, she had a son and that she made a pact with the devil to live on through her bloodline. This means Alice carries her blood. Suddenly, Jerry's phone loses signal, and the pages containing Mary's confession begin to melt. A statue of the Virgin shatters, revealing the ghost. Jerry throws a table to block the entity's path, but the ghost easily pushes it aside before teleporting directly in front of him. At that moment, Delgard appears and begins performing an exorcism. The ghost makes the words disappear from his Bible, but Delgard continues the prayer from memory, holding up a crucifix until the entity vanishes. After that, Delgard agrees to join Jerry in stopping the ceremony before Alice can take everyone's souls. That night, several merchandise tents are set up near the sanctuary to profit from the miracles attributed to Alice. A massive crowd gathers at the site, with even more people watching the ceremony online. Inside the church, Jerry and Natalie watch as Delgard begins a ritual using the doll, trying to trap the ghost once again. However, every time he tries to light a match, the ghost blows it out. Suddenly, a flame ignites on its own and strikes the cross on the wall. The cross falls and kills Delgard, whose body also catches fire as the surrounding statues begin to weep blood. At the sanctuary, Alice's eyes begin to change as she prepares to take the souls of everyone present. At that moment, Jerry and Natalie rush in. In a final, desperate attempt to stop Alice, Jerry yells that he faked all the miracles. Natalie starts signing to Alice, explaining that Mary is a demon, not a saint, while Jerry makes up a story about how he forged the miracles. He also claims that Hagen gave up and that Giles asked him to keep it secret. Natalie tells Alice it was Mary who killed Huygen. Alice begins to doubt everything. The crowd starts to turn against Jerry, protesting loudly against what he's saying. At that moment, Mary's voice orders Alice to complete the ceremony or lose her ability to speak forever. Finally, realizing she's been manipulated, Alice refuses. She then declares to everyone that Mary is not real. The crowd begins to mock and insult her, but suddenly, the tree and all the decorations burst into flames. Panic breaks out as people begin to flee. But the boy who had once been healed can no longer walk, and Natalie has to rush in to save him. As the fire spreads, the ghost emerges from the tree, intensifying the flames. Alice then removes her mask, revealing her burned face, and touches Giles, instantly burning him. Jerry and Alice try to escape, but the ghost blocks their path. The spirit then burns Jerry's hand and pushes him, causing his leg to catch fire as well. Just as the ghost is about to kill him, Alice steps between them and takes the blow instead of Jerry. The spirit's hand strikes her chest, and she dies. Since Alice was the last descendant, the spirit can no longer exist. The entity screams as it disappears into oblivion. In tears, Jerry holds Alice's body and prays to God for mercy, causing her to come back to life. Sometime later, Jerry, Natalie, and Alice visit Huygen's grave. Alice can no longer speak, so Jerry is learning sign language to communicate with her. Inside the church, a statue of the Virgin Mary starts crying blood again, bringing the unholy to a chilling close.